Well, I think that the verdict for most African Americans on the New Deal was delivered in the 1936 election. And that election was crucial because for the first time, African Americans overwhelmingly supported the Democratic Party rather than the party of Lincoln. This shift, as you well know, has been a lasting shift to support for the Democratic Party, but it also placed Roosevelt in a dilemma that I think has also faced every subsequent Democratic candidate. And that is, how do you at the same time appeal for black votes while keeping the votes of white Americans, and particularly those in the South? This becomes the concern of the Roosevelt administration, the Truman administration, John F. Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, and whoever is elected next. Because now we see that no longer is the South a solidly Democratic region. Now the South has become, in part because of the race issue, a solidly Republican part of the country. I think Bethune tried as best she could to, rather than muzzle the criticisms of the New Deal, she gave them voice. She provided conferences where people could get together and discuss the strengths and the limitations of the New Deal. But I think outside the government, the criticisms were much stronger, and by the end of the 1930s, you begin to see the emergence of a strong critique of the New Deal by black intellectuals, and some of whom we will be talking about in future lectures. And also, I think by the end of the 1930s, what we see is the emergence of a group of intellectuals, Ralph Ellison, Zora Neale Hurston, artists such as Aaron Douglas, Jacob Lawrence, and Shirley Graham, the dramatist, who are all interesting because they become the voices, a new generation of voices for African Americans, but all of them benefited from the New Deal. All of them get their start in the arts working for the WPA, particularly the Writers Project, the Artists Projects. Some of you have probably been to many public buildings that have murals, and you'll notice that a lot of these murals are from the 1930s. And what that indicates is that this was a job that for many of the people who did those murals or actually built bridges and other things, did plays, all of these were ways of providing work for artists who were out of work. Now, for white artists, this meant that they were able to sustain their careers. For many black artists, for the first time, they were able to make a living by doing their art. The federal pay might not have been much. I think for one of the arts programs, it was like $120 a month. But getting $120 a month during the Depression meant that you were able to survive for the first time doing things like painting, writing, and other kinds of artistic activities. For Du Bois, though, by the end of the 1930s, I think his life was still, in his view, in decline. He adjusted to living in Atlanta, but for his wife, that was she did not want to return to the place where their first son had died, and it brought back all of those memories. For him, he understood that he was going there because he had been booted out of the NAACP, the organization that he had started. He did not know that around the corner they would be calling him back, and that'll be in a future lecture, that they needed him by the mid-1940s. But at the end of the 1930s, he had begun to understand that he needed to alter his political perspective. He needed to come to terms with what had gone on in the era of the Great Depression. He moves gradually to the left. And then with the advent of World War II, increasingly toward the orbit of the Communist Party.